It is Sunday, March 12th, and this is the Georgia Gang. Unrest over Atlanta's planned public safety training center once again leads to destruction and criminal charges. What happens from here? The Georgia House approves their version of the state's upcoming budget, why some hope there is room for negotiation. And don't bet on it, why sports betting may not be dead this session after all. Melita, Phil, Theron, and Janelle are all here. The debate begins now.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
Good morning and thank you for joining us. I'm Claire Sims in This Week for Lori Geary. It was an explosive week as the uproar over the planned Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility in DeKalb County led to yet another round of protests and arrests. Construction equipment set on fire, fireworks and Molotov cocktails lobbed at law enforcement. This was the scene Sunday evening at what is slated to be the site of Atlanta's Public Safety Training Center. Atlanta police say people attending a nearby music festival went into the woods and changed into black clothing before launching what Chief Darren Shearbaum labeled a coordinated criminal attack against officers.
When you attack law enforcement officers, when you damage equipment, you are breaking the law. And this was a very violent attack that occurred this evening, very violent attack. And this wasn't about a public safety training center, this was about anarchy, and this was about the attempt to destabilize.
Police arrested 23 people and charged all of them with domestic terrorism. Only 2 of them are from the state of Georgia. No officers were hurt. Protests against the planned facility continued throughout the week, from Woodruff Park to the DeKalb County Jail, where demonstrators projected messages onto the building that read, "Stop Cop City," and "We are here with you." Chief Shearbaum says actions like what happened on Sunday will not be tolerated, but we've really seen things escalate in recent months. Phil, I know you'd like to address this. What do you think it's going to take at this point to stop all this violence?
Well, I thought that was a good package for our viewers. What can stop it is we have to stop the demonstrations. They had a music festival, for example, just before this latest incident. We knew what was going to happen. It would be hijacked by the hard leftists, the radicals, the Antifa movement that Chief Shearbaum says, a nationwide organization. They just want disruption. They don't care about a forest. This is not Yosemite National Park here we're talking about. But anyhow, there should be a moratorium on all demonstrations. I'm for the First Amendment and the right of assembly, but other cities have done this because public safety is paramount. You could have had people hurt and killed at this latest round, and so I think that ought to be number one. And I just want to thank the law enforcement agencies that did respond. They shouldn't have been surprised. I wish they had intelligence assets there that would have told them this, but hats off to the Fulton County Sheriff's Department. Even the Sandy Springs Police Department came in to help, of course, the state troopers and the GBI.
Melita, what do you think?
Well, I think there's broad agreement that a police training facility is needed. And further, we can all agree to condemn destruction of property and setting fires, throwing Molotov cocktails. These are not elements of peaceful protest, and they're not part of the time-honored Atlanta way. However, there are some ways that this situation continues to be mishandled. For example, arresting a clearly marked legal observer, an attorney for a national civil rights organization, and guarantees that there will be national and international scrutiny on the way these arrested people are treated. The other thing is that there are reports that they separated out everyone who lived locally before they carried people to jail and actually charged them, so that they preserved their narrative of outside agitators. So there are parts of the other side's narrative that are legitimate concerns.
Janelle.
So I understand what you're saying, Melita, and I think I'm concerned. What I'm concerned about is the fact that I think when we start giving any type of leadway to this type of organization, they look for that. They want that so they can continue to go. But I know you said that this was something that's been escalating in Georgia over the last couple of months. but it's been escalating for the last couple of years. Antifa didn't just develop. It's been around since before, or right before, really happened right after the George Floyd of killing. And that's where you saw them kind of rise up all across the country. So we've known on the Republican side, we've talked about Antifa for a very long time. We've said this is going to be a problem because that's what this is. But my disappointment comes in when I think about why is Warnock and Ossoff so quiet? I don't hear anything from them. Why are they letting the mayor have to defend and fight this by himself? He needs some backing. He shouldn't be the only Democrat that's saying this. It shouldn't just be Republican. So that's a concern.
John Ossoff did have a statement this week, but Theron, is this ever going to get built? Will we get past this?
Well, the first thing, Claire, is that the violence has got to stop. I think we all can agree that the violence that we've seen with this hijacking of peaceful protesting is not the way to move forward. Secondly, is that the thing that's really getting overshadowed here is that a few weeks ago there was a really good step towards building this training facility. You had CEO Michael Thurman, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens come together along with APD and others in a multi-jurisdictional way to move forward with the land disturbance permit to begin the process of building a training facility. But since then, you've had a challenge of trying to make sure that these people who are there trying to move to that next phase are safe. You got contractors who are afraid for their lives. They don't want to necessarily go out there. And so I think, we can't overshadow that and I agree with Melita, there are people that were there who are true environmentalists who had some very legitimate concerns. Majority, if not all of those concerns, have been met with this memorandum of understanding. But now you have the people who are being overshadowed who really truly have legitimate concerns, who are peaceful protesting, that are being hijacked with these people who are doing the violence. And Janelle, I would say this. I think you definitely, and I'm glad you got that in, Claire, Senator Ossoff, and I know Senator Warnock definitely does not want this violent attack to continue. I think he has said something, if not, he'll say something soon. But what I think we got to do is that we got to continue to understand that this is a phased approach. And so I think the leaders that are involved, you can't just go in there and clear them out or to shut it down. You got to have a plan B, C, D, and E for when you do that, and I think that's in the works.
Okay, we're going to have to move on. This will be continued, I'm sure. The Georgia House of Representatives approved their version of the state's 2024 budget on Thursday. The $32.4 billion spending plan includes a $2,000 raise for state employees with an extra $2,000 for state law enforcement and $6.3 million to cover the student portion of reduced school breakfast and lunch, as well as more law enforcement. But one of the glaring differences between the House and what Governor Brian Kemp proposed is funding for the Hope Scholarship and Hope Grants. In his State of the State address, the governor said he wanted to return to Hope paying full tuition for B average students. The House's budget only funds tuition for Hope recipients at 95%. Melita, I want to start with you. The argument from House leadership was that they wanted to preserve the integrity of the Zell Miller Scholarship. What do you make of that?
Well, I think that is important to many in the House, and I think that Stacey Evans, who herself was a Hope Scholarship recipient and is a kind of a shining star as to what Hope can do for students from rural, underfunded schools when they're given the opportunity to excel with a university education. And she made some very eloquent statements about the fact that that money is there and that she hoped it could be fully funded. And I want to commend her for continuing that battle.
Phil, is this something you think will get worked out on the Senate side or perhaps conference committee?
Yes, I think Stacey Evans, I've always said, has had a good point, and we do have the reserve fund for it. And I agree with the governor that we ought to fully fund it. We had to cut back, back in 2011 or something like that. I think, and we've always said this, and Theron and I always chuckle about it, anything can happen, as you know, Claire, on the 39th or 40th day of the General Assembly session. And so I think you'll see some more action on this.
Speaking of that, crossover day has come and gone. We'll take a look at some of the bills that made the cut, plus why one controversial issue may not be dead after all.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Email them at georgiagang@foxtv.com.
Lawmakers worked late into the night on Monday as they tried to pass bills ahead of the crossover day deadline. A bill to put sports betting constitutional amendment on the ballot failed to get the 2/3 that it needed to move forward. But at a luncheon with the Atlanta Press Club this week, Speaker John Burns hinted that that issue may not be done, saying that the session is 40 days. Phil, you just mentioned this. Let's go back to you on this. Is this going to happen? We saw 2 bills in the Senate fail. A House one never came up for a vote. What are the avenues here?
Well, it's interesting that you saw this signal that you're talking about from the new Speaker of the House. And when you see a signal from the Speaker, as we all know in the past, that means a lot. And so right now, as we're taping the show, they're talking about what germane legislation can we put it on. Should it have that constitutional amendment provision, or should it just go with a straight majority vote? That's going to be the tricky part. But I think you'll see now, you'll probably see the local option parimutuel horse racing put into this. Now will that work? I don't know. Sports betting could have a shot, but you're going to see all of this behind the scenes right up to day 40.
Melita.
So when Phil talks about germane legislation, what he's talking about is a bill from the same code section that allows them to strip that bill. And this doesn't have anything to do with strip clubs. It just means that they can strip the bill and insert the sports betting legislation. So this is the kind of politicking shenanigans that goes on behind the scenes, and that's the way they can do this.
I've heard it referred to as legislative gymnastics. Janelle, one of the important things about that bill that failed on Monday was that it had lots of different beneficiaries. There was money for rural development, economic development. There was money for needs-based scholarships. How important is getting the right mix in there, you think?
I think it is important, but I think the messaging is most important right now for people who are anti-gambling. You know, I think that's the biggest thing, is that there are a lot of people, even myself, where I'm concerned about, you know, whether or not we're enabling individuals who are, you know, who are less fortunate, and putting them in positions where they're not going to be able to come up and change their lives because of this, playing these games of chance. However, I do understand the difference between sports betting and casinos as well. You know, I mean, you're betting on it. I don't want to get into semantics, but there is a little bit of a difference. So I think they have to really work on that. I know my husband wrote an article in Peach Pundit about this, and basically calling it anything other than gambling is a problem for people who know what it is. And I think that they can get the messaging together, it should be okay.
Aaron, what do you think?
You know, last week I tried to get into my friend's head and say exactly what he said this week. But no, I think everyone made a really good point. And Claire, you're down at the Capitol, and we're down there a lot too. And when you didn't see it cross over, everyone traditionally was like, man, that's really bad. It's probably dead. But you're right. I mean, Speaker Burns went from, well, maybe we got to see if the appetite is in the House, to now, interviewed by Lisa Ram, sort of says, well, hold on, there may be life after all. And so I think now what you're going to have to do is exactly take all of what we said today, and I agree with you, needs-based, rural, HBCUs, making sure how you define, you know, where the money's going. And then you also got the sports teams who have been very disciplined in this, but also you have a great team of lobbyists that are working on this, and they kept it quiet. And so now, pay attention to, as we go into day 32 on Monday, the next couple weeks are going to be crucial to then get it past something in the House, because the Senate, as you said, failed. So now you got to recreate something in the chamber, get it back over to the Senate. They got to deal with it. So it's a lot of things that need to happen in a short amount of time.
As is how it works down there, right? All right. One of the most controversial bills that passed on crossover day was Senate Bill 140, which prohibits doctors from giving transgender children some treatments like surgery to help them better align with their gender identity. Supporters say that those under 18 are too young to make those life-changing decisions, while opponents argue it could raise suicide rates among that population. Melita, I want to give you a chance to weigh in on this.
Well, you know, there were people who called crossover day throw out the trash day, and in some ways the Senate sent a lot of trashy bills over to the House for consideration, and this is one of the primary ones. Senator Sally Harrell has a trans child, and she spoke very movingly about the dangers of that bill. But Reverend Senator Kim Jackson probably gave the most chilling warning in saying, you know what, to her colleagues who were worried about irreversible medical consequences, when she said, you know what's truly irreversible? Suicide. Because these kinds of laws have proven to increase suicide rates amongst trans youth. And I thought it was very interesting that you had so many trans youth at the Capitol that day lobbying on their own behalf. We're raising a new generation of lobbyists.
Janelle.
So there's a report in the National Center for Transgender Equality that said 40% of transgender adults in the United States have attempted suicide, as opposed to 4.6% overall. And then Sweden conducted a survey as well, where they followed a 30-year survey where they followed a group of individuals who were post-surgery trans adults. And 10 to 15 years later, out of that group, the suicide rate was 20% higher than their peer groups. So I do think suicide is something we need to consider. However, I don't think it's connected the way that you're presenting it, or as others are presenting it. I think it has a lot to do with making these decisions too early. So I absolutely agree. And this is not a heterosexual issue. I've talked to people that are part of the LGBTQ community that are totally against this idea of changing or having surgeries done on children at a young age in case they want to change their mind, or in case, because there are statistics are showing that there are people who are identifying as trans today that may not identify as trans tomorrow. And so that is something that we do need to keep in mind. So I do think we have to keep age at the forefront of this.
But surgery is a very rare occurrence. The primary focus of this bill is hormonal medications doctors prescribe in consultation with the family. And the legislature is saying in this instance, we know better how you should raise your child than you do.
No, that's not what it's saying at all.
Yeah,
not
I
at all.
disagree with that.
We have to move on. Thank you. Coming up, local officials make serious allegations against Wellstar. Why they want a federal investigation. Next.
Join the discussion on the Georgia Gang Facebook page and watch past episodes on the Georgia Gang YouTube channel.
The closure of the two Wellstar hospitals in Central and South Fulton County over the last 8 months has had a tremendous negative impact on our residents.
Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts and other local leaders have called for a federal investigation into Wellstar's decision to close Atlanta Medical Center and AMC South. Pitts accused the hospital system of redlining. That's only choosing to do business in more wealthy white areas. Now, Wellstar issued a statement responding to those allegations, saying in part, the suggestion that they have discriminated in any way against patients and communities is outrageous and false. They also said that they are the largest provider of charity care in the state. Now, Theron, in the spirit of full disclosure, I want to start with you. I know you do work with Wellstar.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I think the statement says it itself. And while this press conference was had by a lot of people who I work with, a lot of people who are very passionate about this decision that Wellstar made, I think Wellstar was pretty specific that this claim about discriminatory acts and that they are redlining is false, and that's what Wellstar is saying. And I think, just to know that Wellstar, since they made this decision, and it goes back to 2020, Claire, that they said, hey, if we don't get some type of financial help, they're one of the largest charitable hospitals in the country, and we're going to be forced to make some tough decisions. And so since 2020, many of those people who were at that press conference know that Wellstar has been reaching out and trying to do everything they could to try to keep the hospitals open, but unfortunately they had to close.
Melita?
Well, I think it'll be very interesting to follow the lawsuit and see what kinds of documents are produced. Headlines on other subjects have shown us this week that document production and lawsuits like this can be very, very interesting. But even this lawsuit does not address the fact that Atlanta is now stuck with one level 1 trauma center, and most cities our size have at least 4. Georgia is vastly underserved medically, particularly for emergency medical treatment, and neither this lawsuit nor Wellstar nor the leadership of the state have addressed the underfunding of medical care in this state.
Phil, Northeast Georgia Medical Center is now a level 1 trauma center. Will that help?
Yes,
is it
it
too
will.
far?
Yes, it will. And I just want to point out, Wellstar is the largest trauma care center system in the whole state of Georgia, too. And to go back to Theron's point, the Atlanta Medical Center has been hemorrhaging money for years, and the mayor, the city, everybody, Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts knows very well. They were warned for at least 3 years. You just can't keep hemorrhaging money. And so, yeah, I think Grady is taking some of the load, but I think it's totally unfair. I think it's a waste of time to have a federal investigation. I am surprised you're for transparency. Is that like the January 6th committee videos coming out? I'm in favor of that type of transparency. But no, I think this is unfair to Wellstar, and I think the statement said it all. There's no discrimination here.
Janelle?
Yeah, I feel the same way. You know, I kind of chuckle inside when I hear people making decisions, when they take decisions that incorporate or include, you know, millions and millions of dollars and reduce it down to something so simple as the color of your skin. You really can't do that when you're making these type of decisions. I read that and correct me if this is not part of their statement, but I thought I read that they spent more than $350 million to cover losses and to make improvements to the Atlanta Medical Center, along with losing $100 million in the year that they closed. So I think this is about green, not black or brown. And so we got to make sure that if you're going to provide a service, you got to be able to fund it. So that's where I think this really comes down to.
Yeah, that number is correct. Real quick, Claire, and I respect everyone's opinion about this, but I don't want our audience to not think that Wellstar is not going to continue to try to serve diverse communities through the region. While they had to make this very, very tough decision to close after multiple years of funding this hospital, they are committed to meet with any and everybody, many of those folks at the press conference, to talk about the best solutions going forward. Because you're right, we do need to make sure that whatever is replaced there is going to be the right thing for the Atlanta community.
All right, very quickly, the CEO of Atlanta-based Norfolk Southern, Alan Shaw, testified before a U.S. Senate committee Thursday and said he was terribly sorry for the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, that resulted in the release of toxic chemicals. He promised the company will be there for as long as it takes for the community to recover. But was his testimony too little too late? That was February 3rd that this happened. Janelle?
It is a little too late, but I know it takes time for companies to develop what they're going to say and kind of get their mind wrapped around it. But I want to say that, you know, when I look at what's happening in Ohio, I think that it makes me question this whole conversation around Democrats around equity that they like to talk about, because I feel like our poor white communities are extremely underserved. I think that we are they are underrepresented, and I really feel like that's what this is really boiled down to. It's just an overlook of a community that is just not being focused in on. So I really want to see our leaders do better.
Okay.
Well, I would say this very quickly. If I was the consultant for the Norfolk Southern CEO, I think he needed a lesson in some crisis management. Yes, he should have been there to the site a lot sooner. He should have been more specific on reforms as to what's going to happen. He said, oh, we're going to make it all right. Well, okay, that sounds good. What does he mean by that? What does he mean by fixing what's wrong with the axles on the trains? We've had more derailments since then. There was no specificity.
All right, winners and losers when we come back. Welcome back. Melita, we're going to let you start first this week.
Thank you. The largest freshman class in Georgia legislative history suffered a deep loss on Wednesday with the death of first-term legislator Letitia Tish Nagazy. Deep condolences to her son and extended family. She had a broad smile which conveyed her energetic and enthusiastic and passionate approach to public service, and she'll be long remembered as a champion networker and extraordinary public service, and all of those legislators are so deeply sad about this. My winner of the week is the Carroll County Democratic Party, who gathered on Thursday night. They had an audience of 120, which is a lot of people in a ruby red county. And I may have been the speaker for their dinner, but the real star of the show was Nellie Dukes, for whom the dinner is named. She's 92 years old. She attended, and she's been a longtime champion for women's rights.
All right, Phil.
Nobody booed you? Well, okay, that's
No,
good. Okay.
dear. They gave me a standing ovation.
I've got a winner, and it's Trey Kelly. He's the outgoing chairman of the Fulton County GOP. He's been there for 3 terms. Party chairman of local parties have a tough time. You make needless enemies when you're in that position. So I have to make him a winner. And Theron, I'm sorry, Senator Raphael Warnock is a loser. I don't like anyone, regardless of party, voting present on a controversial issue. And that's what he did when the DC D.C. City Council did this permissive liberal lowering of penalties for murders and carjackings. Most Democrats voted against the permissiveness. Warnock votes present. Loser.
All right, it's a good segue. But definitely want to join Melita in really offering my condolences to the family of Tish Nagase. Wonderful woman. Everyone in the freshman class loved her, so definitely want to echo that. Also wanted to highlight Zernona Clayton, who is a woman who is instrumental in the civil rights movement. They put a statue in downtown Atlanta for her this week. And what I learned, Claire, is that she used to tell me I was her boyfriend, but she had a long list of people. There were all these boyfriends, and everybody said Andy Young. Definitely want to make her. And then lastly, a little sad news. We lost a giant this week, Arthur Queen, who's a person who is well known in the contracting world, was a former president of EGM, but passed away this week. So I want to definitely offer my condolences to his wife, Sandra, his daughter, Kelsey, and his son, Robert.
Janelle.
My winner, I want to give a shout out to Sandra Ricketts Taylor, who's a founder of Women Moving On. She is someone I ran into, and I told her I will shout her out, so there you go. And then I also wanted to highlight, I'm speaking at 2 events. On March 18th, I'm speaking at the Frontline Biblical Citizenship Academy. I'm on a panel with some other dynamic speakers. And then on March 23rd, I'm moderating a discussion between Reverend John Amachuko, as well as Dr. James Lindsay and Dr. Elvita King, and we're going to be talking about DEI, critical race theory, Christianity, all that stuff. So you can go to my social media and get all the details.
All right, Theron, we've got just a few more seconds.
The Kennesaw State basketball team.
Yes.
The Owls.
The Owls are going to the March Madness tournament, so shout out to that amazing team and their coach, and just a wonderful institution that's making a lot of great things happen, and I want to say congratulations to them.
It's exciting, and I know the Fox 5 Sports team has it all covered. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll see you back here next week for the Georgia Gang.